Okay, let's dive into this. You know the face. You've seen it everywhere, on t-shirts, posters, murals, all over the globe. It's got to be one of the most recognizable images in the world. But the story behind that intense stare, well, it's a story of some serious contradictions. A doctor who became a guerrilla fighter, an idealist who became an executioner, and a revolutionary hero whose biggest legacy might just be a photograph.
So this picture, it's actually titled Guerrillero Heroico, or Heroic Guerrilla Fighter. It's been called the most famous photograph of the 20th century. And you can see why. It's become this universal symbol of rebellion and youth, of fighting the system. But for a lot of people, the actual man behind that image is a total mystery.
So, yeah, who was he, really? Beyond the pop culture icon, there was Ernesto Che Guevara. And let me tell you, he was a complex and, frankly, a really controversial guy. His life was way more complicated than any poster could ever show. So that's what we're going to unpack here.
Now, his journey doesn't start where you'd probably expect, like in some jungle war camp. Nope, it starts in a pretty comfortable, middle-class home in Argentina. So how on earth did that kid become a global symbol of revolution?
Okay, so he was born in 1928, grew up in a family that was doing all right for themselves. But then, in 1951, he takes a break from medical school to go on a trip that just changes everything. He and a friend travel 8,000 kilometers across Latin America on this beat-up motorcycle. And what he saw, the intense poverty, the injustice, it just shook him to his core. The real final straw, though, came in 1954, when he was in Guatemala and saw the CIA orchestrate a coup, all to protect corporate interests. A year after that, he meets a young Fidel Castro in Mexico City, and boom, his path was set.
And this quote, wow, it really tells you everything about where his head was at. It shows you just how much that trip messed him up. He saw what he called capitalist octopuses exploiting people everywhere, and his beliefs just hardened into this burning, revolutionary passion. He swore he wouldn't rest until they were annihilated.
And all that passion, all that fire, well, it found its ultimate stage in Cuba. This is the chapter of his life that would turn him into an absolute legend.
I mean, just think about the odds here. It's 1956. Only 82 revolutionaries, Che included, crammed themselves onto this little yacht called the Grama, a yacht that was designed to hold like 12 people. They set sail from Mexico to go overthrow a US-backed dictator in Cuba. It was a mission that, honestly, seemed completely doomed from the get-go.
And it almost was. Right after they landed, they were ambushed and their forces were just decimated. Only 22 of them managed to get away and escape into the Sierra Maestra Mountains. That tiny, battered group, that was the beginning of the entire Cuban Revolution. Crazy.
But up there in those mountains, Che proved he was way more than just the group's medic. He was incredibly disciplined, a brilliant tactician, and absolutely fearless in a fight. He rose through the ranks to become El Comandante. And his leadership in the final decisive battle of Santa Clara, that was the knockout punch that sent the dictator Batista fleeing the country and sealed the deal for the revolution.
Okay, but with victory came this question of justice. And this is where Che's story gets really controversial. He was put in charge of the La Cabaña fortress, overseeing these tribunals for officials from the old regime. Now his supporters will tell you he was bringing justice to war criminals who were accused of torture and murder, a process that at the time had 93% public approval. But his critics, they point to the super-fast trials, the lack of due process, and the execution of about 500 people as stone-cold evidence of his brutality.
As a key leader in the new government, Che was a busy guy. He was the driving force behind land reform, and as Minister of Industries and President of the National Bank, he tried to completely reshape Cuba's economy. But his most celebrated achievement, by far, was spearheading the 1961 literacy campaign. Get this, it raised the country's literacy rate from around 47% to 96% in under a year. Just astonishing.
But Che wasn't the kind of guy to just settle down and build a new Cuba. He wanted to export the revolution everywhere. And that dream, well, it would lead him from the absolute height of his success right down a path to devastating failure.
So his strategy was guided by something that became known as the FOCO theory. Here's the key idea. He believed you didn't have to wait around for the perfect conditions for a revolution. He thought a small, really committed group of guerrilla fighters, a FOCO, or a focus, could light a spark that would then inspire a massive uprising. And hey, why wouldn't he think that? It's basically what happened in Cuba.
Yeah, well, it turns out the Cuban model wasn't exactly a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. In the Congo in 1965, he found the local rebels were corrupt and didn't really want to fight. He later called the whole experience the story of a failure. And then, in Bolivia in 1967, his campaign was just a complete and utter disaster. The local peasants didn't support him, the Bolivian Communist Party wanted nothing to do with him, and the army, which had been trained by U.S. Special Forces, was more than ready for him.
And this all leads us to the great paradox of Che Guevara. It was actually his ultimate failure and his death on the battlefield that would cement his status as this immortal icon.
So hunted down by Bolivian forces with some help from the CIA, Che was captured and then executed on October 9, 1967. And his reported last words, "Shoot, coward, you are only going to kill a man." In that one moment, he was transformed. He was no longer a defeated guerrilla. He was a martyr for his cause, basically saying, you can kill me, but you can't kill my ideas.
And here is the final, craziest irony of it all. That iconic photo, the one we all know, it was taken way back in 1960, 7 years before he died. It only spread across the globe after he was executed, becoming this massive symbol that helped build the myth, a myth that was often totally disconnected from the complicated and sometimes brutal reality of who the man actually was.
So today, we're left with these two totally different, irreconcilable versions of Che. To his admirers, he is a heroic martyr, a selfless hero who died fighting for the oppressed against imperialism. But to his critics, he was a ruthless, totalitarian zealot whose violent methods and failed ideas led to a whole lot of suffering. So in the end, that image on the t-shirt forces us to ask a really tough question. Is Che Guevara a timeless inspiration for people fighting injustice everywhere? Or is he a sobering cautionary tale of how revolutionary idealism can sour into violence and dogma? That contradiction, that is his enduring and maybe his most challenging legacy.